This is incredible. Wow. Hi, friends and family. Well, this is Edna from the future here, or at least it's future Edna relative to the Edna in the video I'm about to share with you. I'm actually just getting ready to set off on my next big cycling adventure, which I look forward to sharing more about soon. And in the meantime, I wanted to share this interview that my friend James very kindly and generously did with me not long after I returned home following my big adventure around New Zealand, doing the Tour Aotearoa route and then coming back up Sounds to Sounds. It's a really different type of video than the other videos I've posted, as it's an interview. We're sitting and talking the whole time. You could listen to it as a podcast if you'd like. But for those who are interested in a little bit more of my story and the stories behind the routes that I did around New Zealand, then you might enjoy this or enjoy parts of it. Feel free to skip through. And I look forward to sharing more soon. I do mention my plans towards the end of this video, and you know what they say about plans. So my plans have since changed. I'm doing a different adventure than the one that I talk about, but I will share more at the end of the video. So stay tuned if you're interested, and if you want to just watch more videos of the cycling journeys that follow, I will be back up here sharing more soon. Okay, thanks. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone. My name is James. I'm a solo sailor that's circumnavigating the globe. I recently met Edna here in New Zealand, and she's been on board exploring the local islands with myself and the crew of sailing yacht Rala. And I wanted to sit down and have a conversation with her about her adventure life and the totally insane bike packing trips that she recently did. I think we can get into some nuts and bolts about what she's doing and what she plans on doing, and that you'll find it interesting. So you want to tell everyone your name, and then talk about, you were talking about the story about how we met, so you want to get into that?
Well, okay, so hi everybody, I'm Edna, and so those of you who've been following me already know that I just did a couple of big bikepacking adventures in New Zealand. It started with the Tour Aotearoa from the very top of the North Island, Cape Reinga, down to the very bottom, Bluff. And when I started, I had no idea if I would like it or not, but I loved it. And by the time I got to the bottom, I decided I wanted to keep going. And so I found my way around to Milford Sound to start another route called Sounds to Sounds, back up the length of the South Island from Milford Sound to Marlborough Sounds in the very northeastern corner of the South Island. And along the way on the South Island, I was in Greymouth on a rainy morning, about halfway down the west coast of the South Island, when I was getting ready to leave a hostel. The rain was coming down hard, and I was just kind of like standing there waiting for it to lessen before I left. And there was a couple sitting next to me who started chatting, and they are the Rala Crew that James just mentioned. Ian and Laura, they've been also circumnavigating on a sailboat together, and their boat was up north in New Zealand getting some repairs done while they were on a big road trip. And we just got to chatting, and it was lovely. And I thought it was just a really nice conversation. I've had many of those on my adventure so far. But a few days later, I'm just biking along on the west coast in the middle of some trees, and I hear a beep beep, and then this car rolls up next to me, and it's the Rala Crew. And they pop over and they're like, hello. They were really worried that they were going to scare me and I'd fall off the bike. But no, it was so cool to see them. They pulled over, we had a chat. We figured out when we would be in the same place at the same time again. And we had dinner in Wanaka. And then they made their way back to their boat a few weeks ago, and they messaged me when they were coming down the North Island and they were going to be near to where I live, and asked if I could join them for lunch. And we met for lunch. They said, oh, we're going to bring a solo sailor who's also been circumnavigating with us. His name's James. He's really cool. Don't be afraid of his tattoos. That's how they introduced James. And then we all had lunch together, and then they all asked if I could join for a sail the following weekend. And so here we are.
Yep, so we've been island hopping around the local islands here in the Hauraki Gulf and dodging storms and going on hikes, seeing birds, and it's been fantastic.
And donkeys.
Donkeys, wild feral donkeys, and just like packed with wonderful stories. And so during that time, we've gotten to hear a lot about Edna's crazy life. Now, Edna is extremely humble and has no idea how amazing her stories are, really, to the scale of which they are. So that's one of the reasons I encouraged her to sit down so we could have a conversation, so I can try to draw some of them out for you guys.
Thank you.
So let's talk about your background in adventure. That was one of the striking things in one of our early conversations on this weekend trip. She was like, oh yeah, I wasn't a cyclist before I did the things. Now, she had not been doing extensive cycling, and then she's like, how about I do, almost 5,000 kilometers? So that sort of mania is like, I'm like, oh, I'm interested in hearing more about this this approach. So as we've had conversations, I found out you've done horse packing in Mongolia, and
I grew up, I loved the outdoors growing up. So I've always done a lot of hiking and backpacking, and I've done long solo backpacking journeys.
Can you name some places that you remember?
Yeah, well, when I grew up, I used to just do camps and stuff where you learned how to canoe or backpack through the Adirondacks in upstate New York or something, for a week or two at a time. And then my first really, really big thing where I learned a lot was getting to do a really incredible semester with Knowles. It's a US-based outdoor education company, National Outdoor Leadership School. They're based in Lander, Wyoming, and they run outdoor education, leadership training programs all over the world. And just when I finished high school, I was able to do a Knowles semester in Kenya, where I learned how to backpack and be sort of self-sufficient for a really long time in different terrain. And I think thereafter I've done a lot more solo hiking and backpacking since moving to New Zealand about a decade ago, throughout a lot of New Zealand's great walks, which most of whom have huts that you can stay at along the way. So it's like luxe. You don't need to carry a tent if you're staying at a hut. But yeah, so I've been comfortable with that sort of thing. But cycling, I hadn't done anything quite like what I'd done this year, except with a small caveat, because I thought about it, was talking about this with some friends. I came here as a student in university for the first time in 20 years ago in 2001. And at the end of that, for some reason, I don't remember what sparked this, I decided I wanted a bike from where I'd been studying, which was in Christchurch, on the South Island, kind of middle of the South Island on the eastern side, up to Auckland. And so I rented a bike, and I got all the kit. I definitely had panniers. I followed a road cycling guide, and I did that. But I don't know why. And
but, it kind of corresponds with the rest of your adventure life, from what I understand. It's just different mediums of adventure, really.
It's just getting
I always say,
the world.
And a lot of this relates to sailing on small boats or solo sailing or just sailing at all, is you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So obviously you're good at that. And it's just a means of slow travel by different formats.
Yeah. I think what I loved and what was so new about this cycling journey was the pace was just awesome for getting to really explore so much of Aotearoa, of New Zealand, in a different way and at a pace where you were both really immersed in nature and in the sounds and the smells and everything around you, but also moving quickly enough that you just got to see so much. And it was just so thrilling and awesome. And the other thing I really loved about it that I didn't remember from that trip I did after, like, during university here, was the hills. Like, because every uphill comes with a downhill, and when you're hiking or backpacking, downhills are not usually that much fun. But when you're cycling, like, the work you put in on the uphills really pays off with the downhills, which are usually so much fun. Sometimes they're scary, but most of the time you just get this epic reward, which is, yeah, just very cool. It was a really cool experience.
That's interesting, yeah. Especially with hiking, because downhills can be only slightly less and even sometimes more difficult physically, depending on the grade, right? That is a funny sort of angle to that. So you decided you were you were taking time off from work, and you were looking at different adventures, and then you found the TA, the Tour Aotearoa, and let's talk about the days leading up to it and your first day. So, like, you did it on a mountain bike that you already had, and you just slowly kitted it out, right, as you're preparing?
Yeah. Well, so I had this extended leave that I'd set up from work. So I had a good couple months off and knew I wanted to do something outside. Really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Had gotten more and more into cycling the previous couple years, just really short distances, like to and from, like, places like the grocery store or like a ferry or a bus, like
just as transportation,
or to go to, like, a winery for lunch. So I think the longest I'd cycled maybe before this was 40 or 50 kilometers at a time in recent years. And I'd gotten into triathlons a little bit, just living in an area where there's a lot of, like, I love to run, and there's a lot of swimming and biking. And so I definitely was enjoying cycling. But I was looking at different, like, types of adventures that maybe I could do with my time off, and came across the Tour Aotearoa, like you said. And it really appealed to me because the guys who designed it, the Kennett brothers, who are these like gurus of mountain biking and of cycling trails in New Zealand, they've helped design so many of them. They put together all the information. They designed a route that takes advantage of existing trails and roads and gravel roads, and it's just very well designed to avoid, like, awful traffic, and to really expose you to some of the best scenery and the best cycling that New Zealand has to offer. And they give you a ton of information. Like, they have a packing list, and on that packing list, it's like, here's what you probably really need to have. Here's, like, some people bring and a few people bring. And so as I was getting ready, I mean, I had my little mountain bike. It's a great little giant live mountain bike that I'd gotten for, like, New Zealand dollars, like $750 maybe 3 years earlier, from Torpedo 7, from sort of a general store here. And it's been awesome. She's like a little hardtail, beginner entry-level mountain bike. And I've been using her for some of these little off-road triathlons and for my daily rides. And I got her serviced, and I went to a bike shop and got, like, bags and stuff, watched some videos of other people who'd done this trip, like, watched a lot of videos, which gave me a lot of ideas. And it's actually part of what inspired me to share on YouTube, because I found it so useful to watch the journey of other, like, novice, inexperienced cyclists who decided to do this, and to learn from them. And it gave me so much assurance that, okay, well, I don't know if I'll like it, and I can stop if I don't, but makes me, like, watching these people makes me feel like maybe I can do it. And it gave me ideas for what I would pack or not. But the actual packing was so freaking stressful, because it was like just I mean, I followed the lists, like the clothes, that was not so hard, but like, I thought I needed so much more food than I actually needed. I thought I needed more like toiletries than I actually needed. Bug spray. Like there were so many things I took that I really didn't end up keeping because I just didn't use them as much. And so over the course of the ride, yeah, I sent so many little packages back home, and my neighbors kindly picked them up for me. And yeah, but in the lead up, I think it was nuts. And every day I would be like doing stuff and thinking about the next thing I needed, and like I'd have another trip into town to pick up something, and then I'd come back and I'd like watch another video or talk to someone. I'd realize, oh, I want this other thing. Like one funny moment was I was coming back from one of those trips to town, and I was on a ferry with my bike, and the bike was covered with like a cover to protect it from seawater. And there was another bike that had the same cover on it. And as the guy who was the owner of this other bike came to get off the ferry with me, we both were getting our bikes off, and I had the bike bags and bike kit set up. And so he started asking me what I was up to, and I shared that, oh, I'm hoping to do the Tour Aotearoa. Have you heard of it, the TA? He's like, oh my God, I just did it like 3 years ago. And we ended up chatting for like 45 minutes. And I asked him, like, one of the things I was nervous about was the bike getting stolen at night if I was sleeping in a tent and it wasn't secured to anything. Because what if there wasn't, like, I couldn't wrap the lock around a tree, or I don't know. And so he shared that he, just for his own peace of mind, had gotten this little bike alarm. And so the next day I went back into town and got a bike alarm, which gave me like a peace of mind too. So it was just those little details like every day. But then once you're out there, you're like, yep, I've got what I've got. I have what I need. If I don't, I can pick it up or like find another solution. And I ended up sending so much stuff back.
Yeah. And I'm sure on your next big adventure, you're going to have such a sort of dialed in idea of what you want to take, you know, and I think it'll be a much more streamlined process.
I hope so.
And so much of the anxiety of the first time will be removed to where you'll be, you know, there'll be some kind of nervousness, but as far as like that sort of the great void of having no idea.
Yes.
Like
yeah.
the monster you're up against.
Yeah.
And so your first day started out a little rough.
Oh,
You've
right.
told me that story. Can you tell like a condensed version of that?
Well, so as any of you in New Zealand know, this year, like start of 2023 was not a summer for the North Island of New Zealand. And I live outside of Auckland, which was hammered by rain for most of the summer. And I'd been thinking about heading out on this adventure as soon as there was a good weather window after like the Christmas, New Year's time frame. And it just rained every day for 3 weeks. And finally there was a break in the rain. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go. And I got myself up to Cape Reinga. I took a little flight and then a shuttle. Those of you who've watched the start of this journey already know this. And I was exhausted that day. Like I'd gotten up at 4:30 to like do all the logistics and get my car to a friend's place, get a ride to the airport, get my stuff into a box for the plane and the shuttle. And so I was knackered. I was so tired when I got to Cape Reinga. It was like 2:30 p.m. And I shared this in the video from that time. But it took me 3 hours to put my bike bags on the bike when I got there, which is just embarrassing. But I want to share that because I want other people who struggle to know, it gets better.
And then for point of reference, normally how long does it take?
Like 30 minutes, not even.
But fatigue will do that to you. Fatigue is dangerous and it's so brutal.
Oh my God. My brain was just struggling. Like there were these two bags that I'm like, this is like a kindergartner's geometry project. And I like kept looking at my phone with a photo of it, which I'd taken for this very reason. And I'd look at my bike and it was awful. And the wind was howling. And I was really like, well, I've got a tent, I'll be fine. But I was also scared because the wind was so strong because there was a cyclone system coming in that like the next day. And And so it was unusually windy. It's already normally windy up there, but it was especially strong. So by the time I left the like Cape Rang at the very northern tip of the North Island, it was like 5:30 p.m. and I leave this parking lot, and I'm freaking out. Like the wind was so strong. I'd never ridden through crosswinds like that down the hills. And it was fine, but it was
how far did you ride that first day?
Oh, not far at all. So I don't even know, like maybe 30K. Mm-hmm. Like I don't remember the length, but I do remember that.
But that late in the day, that's probably plenty, I would imagine.
I mean, normally you could ride, and at that time of year, sunsets were like 8:30.
Oh, okay.
And under normal conditions, I would ride an average of maybe 20K an hour.
Oh, okay, cool.
So if it had been like kind of a normal day, I could have gotten another, like a 50K ride in before camping that night. And I think it was 40K to a campground along 90 Mile Beach, which was the first big stretch of this ride. So I thought when I left, well, I'll probably get there. But I had never used a bike computer before. I'd gotten a bike computer specifically for this trip, and all week I'd been like, you have to use this bike computer and like put routes in and try it. And I kept kind of trying, but I didn't really bother. Like I just knew I'd figure it out on the way. And I did, by like failing to turn when it first told me to turn, missing like my very first turn by maybe 5 kilometers, realizing it after like a gazillion beeps that the computer kept like making when it was trying to reroute me, and then turning around when I looked at my phone to see where I was. And then I like went down this road to get to that 90 Mile Beach that you ride down. You follow a road called Tapaki Stream Road, and it goes through a stream and then onto sand. As soon as I got on the sand, I fell like immediately. I was just cursing everything. And then I get to the beach, and it's like this, like it's maybe 7 o'clock at this point, and I'm like, okay, I think I've just got to like go into the dunes in a few minutes and set up tent, which is what I did. Of course, I had not set up my tent before because I was like, well, surely, I mean,
yeah, it's just a tent, no problem.
I've done so many tents. And it was fine, but the wind was like, I mean, I've never set up a tent in wind like that before.
Especially alone. That's a big difference. Sand. Not having another set of hands to hold things down and...
Fair enough. Yeah. Like, I mean, the wind, the sand, all of it, like, was just ridiculous. It took me a while. I did get the tent up. I didn't get much sleep that second night either because the wind was so loud. In the middle of the night, I like went up and got my earplugs, which I'd left in the bike. But man, it was a very classic start to an epic journey. And like in the morning, it took me forever to get the tent, like in the wind. I mean, the wind was basically, the tent became a kite. Like I was just like being dragged by the wind. And there was like a mountain of sand. And so it took me a while to get the tent away in the morning and to keep going. But I did. And then on this beach that day, no one else was stupid enough to be on that beach except for, I mean, like no one was biking or walking or running or doing anything like that. There were some people driving by to go fishing, which was amazing. Like that was wild to see. But I just wanted to be done with that beach. So I went and I was like pushing it and barely going like 12 kilometers an hour, which is really slow for me, in a horrible crosswind. My face and my like body was like covered in sand, like the half of it that was getting the crosswind. It hurt. I was in pain. I was exhausted. I was like, I'm going to finish this beach. Until I got to maybe the halfway point where there's this wonderful little lodge that I knew about in the dunes, and it's marked. It's called Hukateri Lodge. And at that point I thought, well, maybe I'll just stop for some water. It was high tide. I rode up through high tide, which I don't even know how I did that. I was just so determined. And I think the wind had like...
So you're riding on the beach?
You're riding on the beach. And normally you just ride in low tide.
So no protection from the wind. No chance. It's just like brutal. Yeah.
And on a nice day, it's incredible. Mm-hmm. Like... But on a day like that, you don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just not fun. So I go up to this lodge, like past the dunes into like a really sheltered area, and there's just a bunch of wild horses, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, this is just for fun. I'm on my sabbatical, like Edna. And so I, instead of just getting water, I stayed there for a day until the wind passed. When I was able to get back on the bike, like a day later, it was the most beautiful ride. I'm like leisurely, like going along at 25K an hour, and it was such a good lesson and a great way to start, because it was a reminder to me of why I was doing this in the first place, and I was really glad that I'd stayed and got to enjoy the beach ride in those conditions after a day.
Yeah, especially because you're not racing.
I wasn't racing.
You're doing this, like you said, for pleasure.
Yeah.
So now, in hindsight, if you were in that scenario again, would you have just camped at that car park that first night or near to there and just started fresh in the morning?
I don't know. I think probably not. I know myself. No,
yeah,
I probably would have made sure I knew how to use my bike computer and have set up the tent, because it would have been nice to get all the way to the campground that first day, and I really could have if I had more of a brain on that day, and if I had done those things beforehand. But I think I knew that the winds were gonna, I would have had a difficult ride no matter what for the next 3 days, and it was really nice to stay where I stayed. So I am kind of glad it worked out the way it worked out. So
then you made it down through the all the way through the Northland and to Auckland. And then, did you say you got some repairs done in Auckland at a bike shop or something?
I went to every bike shop that is in New Zealand on this ride. So yeah,
you toured the bike shop.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I again, those of you in New Zealand know the flooding and the damage from that cyclone, and that was the Auckland Anniversary Day cyclone for those of you watching from New Zealand, and then all the other ones thereafter. It was awful. And so when I was heading down to Auckland, parts of the ride and the route I was supposed to do were closed off. I ended up getting a ride for the last little stretch from someone I'd met in Hukateri Lodge, which was amazing, as I was coming into town, because it just wasn't safe for me to ride the highways that I was riding at that point, because the side roads were flooded. And so and he took me straight to Benny's bike shop, which, oh my God, I mean, Benny was my lifesaver throughout this trip, and it's just legend. I only met Benny a couple days before I went off on this journey, because I had looked at a video and I saw a double water bottle system someone had, and I'd never seen that, and I hadn't seen that at any of the bike shops I'd gone to. And I was looking up where you could get one, and the supplier mentioned Benny's bike shop, so I called him up. And he was so helpful in just getting my bike all sorted with what I had a couple days before I left. Went back to Benny's. I mean, my bike was kind of in tatters from 90 Mile Beach. The sand was in and everywhere, in all the cables and all of the gearing, in everything. So he cleaned all of that out, replaced what needed to be replaced. I needed a new chain and cassette, which wasn't surprising because it was already on its way out before I started. I figured wait until after the beach to replace it. And then thereafter, there was just, I went to a lot of bike shops along the way, and there are a lot of amazing bike shop mechanics and bike shop owners who were so helpful to me and to so many of the other Tour Aotearoa riders, which was really, really cool. So
can you think of a day that really stands out, or a region, an area of the ride that really stands out to you, to where that's that was a real highlight? It's hard to say favorite because there's so many different experiences, but one that pops into your mind where you smile every time you think about it, where you're that was a fantastic ride or section.
Oh, so many. It is really hard to pick just one. I think there were a couple moments, there was sort of there were the days as I was coming down the second half of the North Island through a region near Rangiwahia and Apiti. It's just this beautiful region with lots of gorges, and beautiful rivers and valleys, between like in the lower half of the North Island that I'd never been to before. And I think it was around there that I started to think about coming back up the other route, the Sounds to Sounds route, instead of ending at Bluff. Like at that point, it was like, I am loving this. And when I got to Wellington, I picked up the information and like the guidebook for the Sounds to Sounds route so that I could do whatever I needed to do to keep going. And another, like the whole, on the way down, like the whole region between the Haast Pass, which,
and what island is that on?
On the South Island. So the route that I went down the South Island of New Zealand takes you along the west coast, and then you come over a pass called the Haast Pass, leaving the west coast into a region called the Otago region. And from that point forward, I had extraordinary weather at that time, and just my jaw like never left the ground for like the next few days. The scenery and the riding was just so beautiful and so enjoyable. And I was loving it. So I think on the Tour Aotearoa route, I mean, there's so much that stands out, like the Timber Trail and Big River Trail, like, there's so much that stands out that I loved, but those are two moments that I remember just really like deciding, I've got to keep going. This is amazing. And then I think by the time I got to Wanaka, that's when I knew I just wanted, like, this journey wasn't going to be over when I was back. Like, I knew I was going to do Sounds to Sounds, and I knew I wanted to keep going after that. And I remember calling my parents from Wanaka then being like, just as a heads up, I'm really loving this.
Different
and was that a beat?
Yeah, it's fine though.
I'm really loving this, and I think I'm gonna have to keep going. And so those are kind of two moments that stand out because they were decision points.
Yeah. So you did the TA, and then you did the Sounds to Sounds, like you just said. So, and you said you did it backwards, right?
Yeah. So these are both extraordinary cycling routes that the Kennett brothers designed. They've done some others. There's another one I want to do called the Kopico that goes east to west or west to east on the North Island. But Sounds to Sounds I'd heard about along the way, and they'd just designed it a couple of years earlier, and most people do it from Marlborough Sound, starting with the Queen Charlotte track in the northeast corner of the South Island, and it kind of cuts through diagonally-ish towards Milford Sound, which is in the southwest corner of the South Island. So when I got to Bluff at the end of the Tour Aotearoa, the TA route, I rode around to Milford Sound. I spent a week visiting some friends, which was so much fun, whom I don't get to see very often because it's really far from where I live. So I visited some friends, and then I got a shuttle to Milford Sound, and I came up this other route, which I did, in the reverse direction from what most people do it. And I was doing it at the time that like a whole group of people were doing it in the annual brevet. And so I got to meet a lot of people who were coming the other north to south direction, which was really fun. I even got to meet and have like a dinner and catch up with one of the guys that I met way at the beginning at Hukateri Lodge, who I rode with for a bunch of that beginning of the Tour Aotearoa ride, and he's also the person who gave me the ride at that very last stretch to Auckland. So it was just really, really cool to come back home on that route,
especially by bike too. To like do almost do like you did like a loop, right, of the
the South Island,
the West Coast, right? I
did a loop of the South Island, kind of a figure eight of the South Island, and then the routes are online if you look at the Tour Aotearoa
and we'll have links
website.
To all that in the description of this video.
Yeah.
So let's talk about injuries and crashes. How many crashes? And you were saying there you have different categories for crashes.
I've learned like whenever,
spills.
I mean, I fell a lot. Basically any mountain biking track, I was bound to fall on. And I got really used to that. I just had sort of like permanent bruises on the sides of my like knees and hips on this ride from that. But most of them were not a big deal. Like it was just like you'd be bumping along on a uphill on a mountain biking track, and I learned the hard way many times that if like I didn't have enough momentum and I hit a rock, that's it. You kind of bump over. I didn't have enough time to unclip. So I had a lot of those. But I did have a few bigger falls just on the Tour Aotearoa route where I fell hard enough and badly enough that I damaged the bike and or myself. Not to the point where I couldn't keep riding, sort of, but where the bike needed to get fixed. The first time was on the timber trail on the North Island. Well, not actually on the timber trail. It was heading towards the timber trail. It was a rainy, wet day, and I was in this beautiful forest on these gorgeous gravel roads. And until that point, most of the time when I fell because I was going way too slow, like on an uphill, and sometimes too slow on a downhill, making a turn and just not having the right balance. And it's really funny because on the video I made from that ride, like I start that day being like falling 3 times, being like, well, that's all right, because most of the time I fall going too slow. Until later that day when I'm going down a gravel stretch too fast and I just don't like see a rut in the road in time because I'm going too fast for myself on that particular ride. And I like got caught in the rut and fell, and I bent the derailleur hanger a little bit. Like I bent a part of the bike that is essential for like changing gears. And so from that point forward that day, every time I was going uphill, I'd usually get locked out where like it would get stuck. The chain would get stuck. I'd have to get off the bike and like fix it and get back on. But like all my crashes that day and every other time I had like a situation like that, I ended up meeting amazing people who've since become friends. So like that day I ended up like running into a group of guys, old boys, they would say here in New Zealand, who were having an epic ride. They've been doing the Tour Aotearoa together in chunks every year, like the first half of the North Island, second half of the North Island, and they're going to head down south next year. And I ran into them. We were staying at the same place that night. We didn't ride together, but when we got to the place that we were staying, we just had a really good catch up. One of them helped me fix my bike. I rode with them the next day, and then we kept meeting up thereafter, and I got to ride with them when I got back to Wellington at the very, very end of my journey or this particular adventure. And they now feel like good friends. It was really, really cool. And I don't know that I would have gotten so close to them if I hadn't had that crash and needed their help and gotten to ride with them the next day and so forth. Yeah.
Awesome. And then so now you're looking forward to your next big adventure.
Yeah.
And you're getting a new bike that's more kind of fit for what you want to do.
Yeah. So I can't believe, I'm so grateful to my little bike for making it through what it's made its way through, because it really was a beginner bike, and I put it through its paces. It did get a lot of parts replaced, but it was kind of extraordinary that it made it through like both those routes in one piece. And I'm gonna let it retire. Like I'll keep using it for little rides around home, but moving forward, I'm just really excited to continue doing more cycling adventures like the ones I've done here in New Zealand. There's so much more I now want to see. I thought this would be like, oh, I'll have cycled everything in New Zealand. No, like it was just a teaser for, there's so much more. It's just amazing. I can't wait to like explore even more of the trails and roads around this country. But I've also gotten to know a little bit about other incredible bikepacking journeys globally. And so I'm hoping to head off to do it's called the GDMBR, the Great Divide, the Great Divide mountain bike route in North America. It goes from Canada down to the border of Mexico, between New Mexico and New Mexico, following much of like the Rocky Mountains and the Continental Divide. And apparently it's like sort of where this kind of bikepacking thing got started. It's meant to be really epic and kind of the next level, I think, for someone who's done what I've done so far and has enjoyed it. So yeah, so I'm hoping to do that in the next, like, as my next thing. And we'll see. I'm gonna be, I've returned to work from like finishing the Tour Aotearoa and Sounds to Sounds, and I'm pulling myself away from my full-time role to be able to do more adventures like this, and going to be shifting into like a more of a part-time flexible role with the organization I work for, whom I love. I've loved my job. Like, it doesn't feel like I don't want to leave. I just really want to do more of these adventures.
There's so much life out there, and sometimes it's like, if you can manage to balance between like not overworking yourself and including kind of like wild adventures, the quality of life part is really, really important. So
yeah, so exactly. So I'm hoping to do the GDMBR, and then come back for another like work project that I want to do in August, and then carry on from there.
Will you be filming the U.S. thing, or
I will.
North
I think
America
it's
thing?
really off the grid for most of it, so I don't know that I'm going to be able to upload videos as often as I did during the TA and Sounds to Sounds, but I'm definitely going to be capturing it. I've really enjoyed, especially solo riding, I've really enjoyed capturing like the moments during the rides that have really felt like amazing, because when you're on your own, it's just, you want to share it. Like, I really enjoyed.
I totally get it. Yeah. And also just being able to like vlog and document your life in a journal through video, it gives so many people a chance to see these incredible places, people who would never get the opportunity to see these places. So it's like not only a wonderful sort of like documentation of your memories, and you can share it with your friends and family, but also strangers around the world can get to like live vicariously through you, and it's a beautiful thing that we have access to do nowadays.
And it's also, I mean, I think like what led me to watch the videos, like I was saying earlier, I mean, it was really helpful for me to watch other people who weren't experienced and didn't come in with like any magic skills or backgrounds in cycling doing what they did, and that gave me the confidence to give it a go. And I know for me, like, the getting to experience myself growing in my fitness and in my skill level over the course of those kilometers was just really cool. And it was, I think I appreciated that even more just through like capturing and reflecting on and looking back at the stories. And I do think like, yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, so many of my own friends and family and community aren't in a place in their life where they have this unique, like, I feel like so fortunate to have this unique moment of freedom and opportunity to do this. And so many people don't have that in whatever moment they are in their lives. But I also I do think you can like watch stuff like this and watch like normal people doing things like this and realize like we're all so much more capable of things than we think we are. You can start
on a variety of budgets.
And you can start with whatever space and time you have, like the little adventures. But yeah, it has been very cool to do this. I never would have thought that I was able to do something like what I've just done, and it's made me, I just am so excited to continue.
That's awesome. So if you haven't seen her videos, go check them out and make sure you hit that subscribe button. She has a lot more to share. There's a lot coming up.
They'll hopefully be getting better. I should also just say, when I started, I mean, I really just was capturing it for this purpose, like to share with friends and family, with other people who might be interested in doing like the TA, and who, like me, started with minimal experience and knowledge about how to go bikepacking. So I just started, filming on my iPhone, like maybe 3 or 4 videos in, I start Googling, like, how do I connect multiple clips into one video? And I learn about iMovie. And then I how do I add music? How do I cut and shorten clips? So it's been a learning journey for me in that space too. And I mean, it's going to continue to be amateur, but I do, want to share with the caveat if you go back and watch the original videos.
And that's kind of the case with
patience
with all channels as they begin. I started vlogging in 2015, and the same thing, I was using my phone and the wind noise was terrible and I was too shy to be on camera. And yeah, so the more you shoot, the more you edit, the better you get at filmmaking, and you find you enjoy it, and then you can invest more, and so it's just going to get better and better.
Yeah, it's part of the journey.
Yeah, exactly. So check it out. Thanks for the conversation.
You. Thanks,
Very
James.
excited to follow along and see the new adventures.
Thank you.
And yeah, like I said, subscribe to the channel.
And if you haven't seen James's channel, I mean, it's so wild, actually. I didn't mention this earlier, but when... going full circle to start this conversation, when Ian and Laura of the Rala Crew were like, oh, we're going to bring James out for lunch. We went out to lunch, and a few minutes into the conversation, I asked if I could, like, oh, can I see photos of your boats? And everybody pulled out their phones, and I saw James's boat, Tritea, and I'm like, wait a second, I've seen a video of you and your boat, because just before I set off on my journey, there was a video that popped up recommended by YouTube of James sailing from Hawaii to French Polynesia, and I watched it like 3 days before I left for my cycling adventure, and so it was so wild to like
then we just happened to like be having lunch together by mutual friends, and that's like the beauty of all of this. It's like, and also like solo sailing and any solo adventure or slow travel solo, there are so many sort of overlaps, and like we're kindred spirits for sure. Like I understand her struggles, not specifically in the same physical way, but I understand the mental toll it takes and the sort of stamina you have to pull off any kind of solo adventuring. It's a whole nother level of wild.
Thanks.
So
and it's been crazy to learn about what James has done. So if you haven't already seen his channel, it's called Sailing Tritea, and it's just epic. It's wild. Like, and even being on the boat the last couple days and getting to experience it, like every little thing, like picking up and moving anchor. I just can't imagine doing that kind of thing alone. And so it's been really
yesterday
inspiring.
Morning we hauled up an adjacent island here in 26 knots of wind, and I was grateful to have Edna at the helm and drive the boat forward into the high winds and big swells while I was on the bow pulling the anchor up by hand. So it's definitely easier with two, and it was fun to have you on board, and also probably fun for you to compare and contrast like the different styles. You know, eventually she'll probably be doing boat stuff too. She tends to work through the mediums of wild travel. So awesome! Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And everyone have
James.
a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, it's future Edna back over here. Back to the future Edna. Please forgive me for that. I just wanted to give a quick update for those of you who are interested, since I mentioned at the start of the video and in the little footnotes when I was talking about the Great Divide mountain bike route that my plans have since changed. And indeed, as I started to map out my life and work commitments, I realized I just wasn't going to have enough time this North Hemisphere summer to do that route enjoyably and safely on my own. And so I am going to save that for a future date. Instead, in just a couple days' time, I am going to be flying to Vancouver to bike down the Pacific Coast route, which I'm really excited about. And I think it's gonna just give me a chance to really settle into the new bike that I've just picked up today. That's the other update, and I'll share more in an upcoming video, but I was able to pick up my new bike from Benny's Bike Shop. And actually, while I was there, I met someone that had ridden the Pacific Coast route a few years ago and raved about it, so I'm really looking forward to it. One of the things I'm particularly excited about is that a few of my dear friends who are from the US, we had planned like a girls' weekend together in the Bay Area, kind of halfway into this coming North Hemisphere summer. And so I'm really looking forward to doing this big bike ride and also getting to spend some quality time with good friends along the way. So those are my new plans, and I will be sharing more soon. And thank you so much for watching and listening. And yeah, take care. More soon. Thanks.